What's up, everybody? Welcome to an MMA crunch time before lock here on a beautiful UFC 288 card. Lots of opportunities, 2 5-round fights in this spot. Hopefully people forget that there are, because one of them isn't a title fight, Blender. And I know you like 2 5-round fights. Definitely provides more opportunities for different and unique builds. And I will say, my favorite fight on the whole entire slate, Braxton Smith versus Parker Porter. What a hell of a card we got dealt this week.
Yeah, I think there are going to be a lot of finishes. We have 12 fights, 2 5-round fights. So just remember, not only the main event, but the Gilbert Burns Bilal Muhammad fight, co-main, is a 5-round fight, even though it's not a title fight. And the spreads are quite even. And you mentioned it about, with 2 5-rounders, that gives you more opportunities to be unique. And that's primarily because the field tends to shift more towards, we see in normal slates where there's 1 5-round fight, that the main event 5-rounder tends to get increased ownership. A lot of times it's over-owned, right, on both sides. Now, it's only a 12-fight card. I liked it better when it was 14 fights, but we can only get, we get out the cards that were given, 12 fights. It still feels like I've been running lineups. I'm playing 100 a day. That as long as you stay away from certain combinations, because a lot of people are going to play 2 5-rounders in their lineup, and Evloev. That's like, if you're building a lineup that goes Evloev and 2 5-round fighters, play Rolando Bedoya. It's time to play Marina Rodriguez. Oh. It's time to really get different. But if you don't make that construction, there are way more lineups that are available to you that are under 10s, under 5s. We have an increased prize pool for a UFC card for $200K to first. So I'm a little bit, if I'm duped 7 ways, it's not that. It's like, okay, I don't mind it that much. So I've built most of my lineups that don't have most of my lineups don't have I don't have any lineup that has 2 5-rounders in it. Yeah. And I've maxed out that, if Evloev is in the lineup, I mean, essentially I'm playing, 1 5-round fighter and then getting kind of different elsewhere.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. With the 2 5-rounders, I expected you to get really crafty, and I think mixing in the underdogs that there's a lot that have ceilings, but getting off the popular underdogs is going to be an easy way too. You're going to have your Con Gracies be popular, your Devin Clarks, but then around them are strikers or people that potentially have the ability to just knock out early and get you to the promised land. This show, we're going to bring you up to lock as close as we possibly can. And remember, it's brought to you by Fanduel Sportsbook. If you're in a legal sports betting state, take advantage of their awesome bonus offer. New customers get a bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets. Terms and conditions do apply. We were talking pre-show about some bets. There are underdogs on this card. I honestly think earlier on in the week, I thought maybe the favorites were going to run. But it's hard to ignore passive victory on this slate, Blender. You have like a Braxton Smith who could get a quick win knockout bonus, which he's done in almost every fight. You have Con Gracie, a Gracie last name with a submission prop of like plus 240, plus 250. You have, Joseph Holmes and Devin Clark, Hawes. There are live underdogs on this slate. Frivola is going to be probably somewhat popular as well. But living in that middle range on this slate is probably going to be a popular build. Would you agree with that? Or you think that's... I would rather go stars and scrubs to be different if it is going to be a middle range. But how are the popular builds going to be with those 2 5-rounders dead in the middle?
Well, the spreads of the fights dictate that. I mean, outside of 2 fights, 10 fights on this slate, it's a 2-1 or less. So Dober is minus 200 at 9,200. Between him and Frivola, these are 66-33s, 60-60-40s, 58-42s. And then you got Chaos Williams, the most expensive, at minus 350. Okay, and then you have Evloev, who's now minus 800 at 9,400 because Lopez is a last-minute 3-day replacement. So like he's the ultra big favorite on the card, and with wrestling, the wrestling upside also. So like that's why he's going to be one of the most, if not the most owned fighter on the slate. But the mid-range fights and most of the underdogs, I don't say all of the underdogs, like there are 100 points available at a lot of these. I mean, there is a path to 100 points in almost every fighter on this slate. I mean, the ITD lines are good. I mean, it's rare that we see underdogs with plus 175, plus 210, plus 220, plus 325, like as dogs. And then like all the way from Chaos Williams down to Parker Porter, like it's all like 38% or better, like inside the distance, 38 to 64%. So like I'm expecting, I'm expecting a lot. I'm expecting, 7-8 finishes, if not more, on this slate. It leans me away from fights like, like the Marina Rodriguez, Verna Jandarova fight. It leads me away from the Kennedy Nzechukwu, Devin Clark fight a little bit. Like I feel like it leads me away from Yan Janan with plus 690 inside the distance. Yeah, does she have win equity? I guess plus 152. Sure, but it's hard.
She
for me
could not even get there in a win. I mean, she could score 65 points in a decision win. I mean, she's probably the only fighter on the whole entire slate that could actually do that. Like, that's not great,
right? But everyone else, I mean, like Diego Lopez, even if Diego Lopez upset Mozar Evloev, it's probably because he reversed something and caught Evloev in some type of submission by the way that Lopez fights. I think that's why he's the lowest owned fighter on the slate. He's plus 600. But like it could, Rolando Bedoya could take down Chaos Williams. I mean, like everyone is viable on the slate. In my 100 lineups, I have everyone. Now, I don't have much of some of these fighters, but I mean, I've not X'd out anyone. And the guys, the fighters that are in the mid-range, a lot of them have the same, like I view Parker Porter and above. So basically it's kind of weird for me to say. Other than the main events, the 5-round fights and the Marina Rodriguez Jandarova fight, every fighter Parker Porter and up have a legitimate path to 100 points. So with that being the case, like if the low price fighters can't do that, like these mid-range builds, they're going to be less owned because of Evloev's ownership. So you're going to see a lot of people with Evloev and 2 5-round fighters, and then you're going to have to play some like high 7K and then some like mid 7K and then a mid 8K. So like a popular build will be something like Evloev, Andrade, Burns, Sterling, Gracie, Hawes, like something like that. Like that type of lineup. If you're staying away from those types of builds, I disagree with you, Mike. I think the mid-range builds, if you're starting your lineups with like, I'm going to play Dober, Andrade, Porter, 1 5-rounder, and take a shot on like Devin Clark as like.
So you're thinking it's one of those guys then down below is somebody's grabbing somebody, Hawes, Clark, Holmes, even Frivola in that mix, and then going up to grab the top end and then settling on that middle.
Yeah, but you don't even have to grab because you could grab a top end fighter, a 9K plus fighter, and still have less ownership. I mean, Evloev is going to suck up so much of that 9K ownership that, I mean, Dober is minus 125 inside the distance. I mean, Aliskerov is plus 115. Obviously, Chaos Williams is minus 180.
First fight of the night
is currently plus 115. I mean, like, dude, it's not just Evloev up there. Like, if you just pick that type of lineup with 1 5-round fight and then move from Evloev to Dober, I mean, that in and of itself could be enough.
I mean, Evloev is showing at 40% and higher end stuff. He's going to be super duper, almost, 60 plus, I'd imagine. And the problem is like this guy could absolutely score you 135 points. I mean, you're going to say probably that anybody could do that on this slate, but I mean, his style and the way that this guy's a guard puller as well. I mean, there's a lot of things where, if I'm building 150, I'm not going to necessarily lock Evelev, but I would strongly consider it the way that I play. I
No,
mean,
well, what you're really saying is that his path to 120 plus points doesn't have to be in a finish. So, like, he could get there with a finish or not. Chaos Williams, you got 5 minutes. You got 5 minutes, dude. For unless it's going to be like ultra knockout, multiple stuff like that. I mean, Drew Dober, you got 5 minutes, dude. Like, Aliskerov could wrestle some, but I'm a little bit more,
Dober does have, the second and third round multiple knockdown. I mean, these two guys don't.
That's most probably. Would you agree that that's most likely? If you had to choose, that's probably going to be fight of the night. Dober, Frivola.
Yeah.
As far as an action, I'm not saying for DFS purposes. No. It's just the way that Frivola fights is that he's going to go out and try to put on a show, and he may get killed in the process.
Yeah, it has to be a favorite outside of the 2-5 rounders because, I know that there are some markets out there that do offer odds on, the fight of the night, and that definitely would be up there for contention. But I really think that there's two fighters that I bookmarked to talk to you about, and they really are kind of interesting cases. It's Charles Jourdain and Andrade. I mean, Charles Jourdain is the most interesting case because Kron Gracie, I think, is going to be somewhat popular. I mean, it's showing about 22% owned. I expect him to be higher owned because of Path of Victory. But Charles Jourdain fits your type of mold to kill off a chalky guy that could grapple. I mean, Charles Jourdain fights variance. His style is variance, really, honestly. So
I think the question with Jourdain comes down to how this fight plays out. I mean, if everything's stuck together, like the line, the reason why the line is the way it is because Kron Gracie is a mental case, right?
And his last name right. Dictates people are going to click his button.
No, but now I'm talking about like the betting line. Like if you told me that both these fighters are going to fight their A+ game plan, Kron Gracie should be the favorite in this fight. I mean, dude, his last name's Gracie, so you understand the reason why. If we knew that Kron Gracie is going to go out and immediately look to take someone's back, like Jourdain has been taken down in every fight. Like Kron Gracie should win. The problem is in his last fight against Cub Swanson, he didn't even attempt a takedown until the third round, and that was like who knows how long ago. So like I don't know who knows. Kron Gracie could look like a -400 favorite. He could also look like a +400 underdog because he stays on his feet and Jourdain just litters him with strikes. And by the second round, it's being stopped by the referee.
Jourdain's definitely your type of guy for this slate, though, right?
Like he's not going to be that low on, though. He's really not. I have him at 24. That's not like ridiculous. That's not.
He could go overlooked, though. I think that's the thing. I mean, I agree with you. He probably matches where he should be, but I don't think he's going to be as high. I don't play Jourdain. Like, I'm more gravitating towards Andrade, who's right there, slightly ahead, but I expect her to be popular because everybody is talking her up.
I mean, I have her at 30, so it's not like she's not like overwhelmingly owned. I mean, really, it's about this card is about combinations, not fighters. So, like, to me, based on my spreadsheet that I show on Friday's show, well, at least the preliminary versions on the DFS pregame show, outside of Chaos Williams and Evloev, who do I have as the highest chance of scoring 100+ points in comparison to their ownership?
In comparison to their ownership?
Right. Relative to their ownership. So who is outside of the two, obviously Chaos Williams and Evloev, who are, very, very likely to put up 100+ points? Who's the high, regardless of price, who's the most likely to put up 100+ points in comparison to how much they're owned? So obviously, like Diego Lopez is 8% owned. So like he doesn't have to have like the highest probability, but it has to be in proportion to their ownership. But I mean, he's +675. So let me just tell you, it's low.
Yeah. I mean,
what do you think?
It's the heavyweights. It's got to be the heavyweights.
It's Parker Porter.
It has
Parker
to be
Porter at 8,600.
That fight itself is just like, you and I know how this fight ends. We know it goes 3 rounds and they're huffing and puffing at the third round, but it's the strongest to finish inside the distance. What is it, like minus 700 at this stage?
I mean, it's ridiculous. I think it's gone past there. It's like this fight. This is a fight between a guy. I mean, Parker Porter, who leaves his head out there and can take a punch. Can't take a punch. Not very mobile, right? Either he's 38 years old.
Bigger cage tonight. Let's remember
Bigger cage, true. Against a guy that, for all intents and purposes, has no MMA experience.
I mean, he's the most fascinating case I've seen come in a long time because he was fighting out of an organization called Peak. And I've been on the pulse for a lot of these regional shows, and I had never heard of Peak. And
they were I saw the tape. These were 5-round fights. They were scheduled.
He was the
5
main
rounds.
event.
He didn't last. Right. But I'm just saying. I watched this guy, and I rarely watch people. But when I listened to the ground and pound, and I read Liam's write up, and I'm like, it's an ex-football player that tried MMA in 2014, lost to Chase Sherman, which is typically a red flag to me.
UFC fighter. He's a UFC.
Right. But that was so long ago. And then he quit. And then last year he got back into it, is not even training in a gym, like in a legitimate MMA gym. And then I watched this fight. It's just this guy looks more like a William Knight type. Like he looks like he's a 260-pound brick shithouse. Right. Yeah. But he's not a technical boxer. This guy looks like if Derby's going on right now, right? I'm in Louisville. Kentucky Derby's going to be happening, whatever. That you go out after the Derby and here in Louisville, and you go to the bars, right? Just go to the bars, go to the whiskey bars, whatever. You're going to find someone that is literally is Braxton Smith. Like, it's just going to be just some big dude, and then they're going to get into a fight, like at the bar, someone hits on his girlfriend or something like that, and he goes, "Let's take this outside." And then if you watch that fight, that's how Braxton Smith fights, right? It's just literally hands up and just like caveman.
It's
overhand,
loopy,
but with all the strength, like all the strength in the world. And then I watched who he's fighting, and he's fighting guys that are practically just standing there waiting. It's like, I'm just going to put up my hands. And then he comes around, he hits someone on this. Like, it feels like
it's binary. It's a binary fight. It's Braxton comes out hot, gets a quick win, gets a knockdown, gets way over where he needs to be. Or there's a lot of points to be had if he gasses out, though. That's my problem. And I almost feel like, Parker, don't you dare kill him right away once he gasses. I want like the little pitter patter. I want you to get the control time. At 8,600, he's fantastic. I will almost wish that Braxton was a little bit higher. Where do you think Braxton ends up coming in? Because
ownership wise, you mean?
Yeah, I mean,
I have him at 26.
I honestly wish he was a little bit higher.
I have Porter at 30, and I have Porter as under owned. He's minus 130 inside the distance. He has the second best likelihood betting line inside the distance. He is a favorite, minus 172, and his win condition. I said most of that win condition is a first round knockout, and when you get a first round knockout, you get 100 points. So, like, he's 8,600. If there's anyone that's like, oh, well, who could outscore Chaos Williams? It's like, well, Parker Porter's win condition is pretty much the same thing as Chaos Williams' win condition, other than Chaos Williams is a bigger favorite.
I'll tell you something crazy about Porter, too. Every single fight that he has won in the UFC, he's notched a takedown. I mean, that's proportional.
And you have to expect, Mike, you have to expect Braxton Smith has no ground game.
Oh, 1,000,000%.
And it's heavyweight, and it's on top of the fact that it's heavyweight. And if you have they don't get up even the people that have good at get up games. It's tough to get up at heavyweight. Like if Parker Porter takes this guy down, I think the fight's over. I don't think
he could get up. But if he does get up, he's got like the football. He was a running back. From what I've
no, he couldn't have been a running back. He's way too heavy to.
They said he was. He said in multiple interviews he was a running back, and his family, wanted him to be a football player. And you know what? If he's athletic, I want the rinse repeat from Parker Porter.
I don't think he's gonna get that. To me, the thing that scares me about Porter are two things. One, his chin. He leaves his head. He doesn't move his head. and two, that is not the most intelligent of people, right? So his path to victory should be to let Braxton Smith punch himself out in 2 minutes, take him down, and then win the fight. Like, that's what he should do. But we also look at a fighter like Matt Frivola, that Matt Frivola should wrestle Drew Dober.
No.
He should. But the dude does Twitter polls to decide how he's going to fight. So, like, do you really trust that guy? Sounds like you're dealing with a very high variance situation. I would not be shocked if Braxton Smith goes out and just wails and just doesn't matter that Parker has his hands up. He just gets hit and crumbles. And I wouldn't be surprised if Kron Gracie doesn't even bother to attempt a takedown and then gets destroyed by Jourdain. And you're sitting there going, do these people understand like what they're good at, and why don't they just do that?
That's what's frustrating. I mean, I've watched a lot of stuff on this week. Every fighter seems to somewhat make the most worst decision at the worst time too. And then you have these people in the corners, especially like newcomers, right? That are their cornermen are going, "You've got this. Come on, man. You got," like, not technical. Like you said, Braxton Smith, some of these newcomers, they're fighting out of their basement. They're not fighting out of ATT. They're not fighting out of these supreme camps, elevation or anything. And the variance is continuing to get higher on these newcomers. But what about this Kennedy and Nchukwu fight? Like, that seems like another one where maybe you might get crafty and hope that Nchukwu gets the knockout, because I expect Clark to be popular. I know it's lower ownership, but his path to victory is going to grind, which would mean good for scoring purposes. 7,200, you don't need a hell of a lot out of Clark. But
I don't think Clark's going to be that popular, Mike.
Really? But
I have Clark at 16 to 18% owned.
Even with the strong path of victory with the takedowns?
I mean, Kennedy ain't, and I mean, he's not like he's trained on the ground, whatever. I'm not a big fan of this fight. Up. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of this fight in general, just because of Devin Clark's fighting style. If he can't get Kennedy to the ground, this is just going to be on the cage for 3 rounds. And that just zaps kind of like fantasy scoring. I prefer Kennedy and Nchukwu based on the ownership up there. But like, I'm fairly like, this is I think my second lowest exposed fight. My least exposed fight is Marina Rodriguez and Verna Jandiroba. And my second least exposed is Kennedy and Devin Clark. The one fight I wanted to ask you about is the first fight of the night.
Oh, it's ugly. I mean, there's ugly, and then there's Claudio Ribeiro fighting with, his one strike every minute.
That's what I was going to ask you, Mike. Joseph Holmes is not. It's not all that. I mean, we're dealing with people that, like, Joseph Holmes had Claudio Ribeiro is a one-dimensional striker, and Joseph Holmes is like a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. I mean, he's
not UFC ready. Let's put it the way it should be.
Well, Claudio, you were talking about Ribeiro.
Both guys are probably not UFC ready. Joseph Holmes came in extremely green, and then he got the Amadowski treatment, right?
Right. But Joseph Holmes, like, I think if Joseph Holmes goes for takedowns, he will get it and he will win. The thing is that will he do that?
I mean,
and also the thing about Ribeiro is that I'm not sure. Dude, I feel like this fight. I mean, you've seen the betting line. The betting line is way closer than it opened at. Like, it feels like this fight is way more than a pick'em than it should be priced at 8,900 and 7,300. Claudio Ribeiro is minus 105 inside the distance. Joseph Holmes' ITD line has gotten to plus 220. So, like, I'm looking at that going plus 220 inside the distance for 7,300 against the guy with one UFC, a fight that he lost. Like, and he's a one-dimensional striker that, like, okay, good luck with the one-punch knockout. Like,
I mean, Ribeiro he's going to be frustrating to watch for fantasy purpose, but he obviously has that first round knockout equity. It's just
all these fighters do. I mean, like, dude, most of this slate is that.
It's just not enough volume. I'm not going to invest in it long term. It's like you said, Holmes should have more tools to win the fight. Whether he uses those is also in question. It's almost like I'd rather go down to Haas, which is wild to say, but Haas is a traditional, amazing DraftKings commodity for us. And fantasy score. The problem for me is Ikram. Ikram falls into a very interesting case here because he's a grappler at heart. Phil Haas is a gasser at heart. Something's going to give here, and I don't like what's going to happen. I know the fight's going to bust is what's going to end up happening. But Ikram is somewhat lower owned in the upper tier. Haas does gas. Haas is 100% takedown defense.
Yeah, but who has he faced? Come on. That doesn't mean anything.
Come on. He has faced Deron Wynn, which was shooting a zillion takedowns.
Yeah, but Deron Wynn is the size of Mike Caterate. This is Deron Wynn.
Yeah.
The thing about Phil Haas is that he comes from a collegiate wrestling background, and he's an athletic guy. So Ikram is going to have a much tougher time taking him down. I think Haas is live more early in the fight, but Haas, 7.5 minutes comes around, and you don't see him do much, and he kind of leaves himself out open, and he can't take a punch very well. So, I mean, I think there's way more upside on Ikram Aliskerov here, but I mean, this is a $9,100, $7,100 fight. The favorite's only a minus 178 favorite. I mean, like, most of these fights are, if either of these guys won, I think the only two people I'd be quite surprised if they won was Diego Lopez and Rolando Bedoya. Outside of that, I wouldn't be shocked if 10 underdogs won on this. Like all 10 other it's that close. So like to prioritize one over the other seems like a fool's errand other than Evloev and the main event fighters. So it's like, I know I'm the play whoever you want guy, but it is a play whoever you want type of thing. And my typical policy when it comes to my lineups is that high variance fights I want when they're under-owned, and I want to fade when they're over-owned. I have less of when they're over-owned.
The math says everybody's in play too this slate.
Right. But the thing is that Claudio Ribeiro's path to victory is you got 5 minutes. Good luck.
And
right?
Even, oh my God, he could be one of those 40-point scorers on the slate if it goes to a decision, which would be ugly. But yeah, I agree. 15 minutes.
Like a lot of Dober, like other than Evloev and Aliskerov and maybe Andrade, and everyone else is just like, you got 5 minutes to find a knockout. I mean, like Chaos Williams, Drew Dober, Kennedy, Ribeiro, Jourdain, Marina Rodriguez, even Parker Porter. I mean, like it feels like I'm just gonna play the people in combinations that other people aren't, and I'm gonna have to play someone for a knockout because I know they're gonna happen. I don't know which ones they're gonna be, but to me, I'm prioritizing by the path. Like I'd rather play fighters that have two paths to 100, which leads me to play more Kron Gracie than Charles Jourdain, which leads me to play more Joseph Holmes than Claudio Ribeiro, which leads me to play more Aliskerov than Hawes, and leads me to play more Evloev than obviously Diego Lopez, right? And then we have the main events. Dude, we're gonna be getting out of here soon. We have 2 5-round fights that are 8,200, 8,100, 8,100, 8,000. Like,
and the public's more apt to fade the Muhammad Burns spot, I'd say, because of the slower pace. The not flyweights, the bantamweights are probably going to be a little bit faster paced. Both.
Do you really think so? I think it's going to be.
I honestly do. But you think Muhammad's the interesting case for some reason.
Was that image photoshopped?
Yeah, maybe
the ankle. Are we even going to bother addressing that he may have an ankle injury that doesn't exist?
No, we're not even going to acknowledge it. Under 15 minutes before lock here, we'll continue to give you some breakdowns. Make sure you smash the like button. Put your questions in the comment section. We will prioritize anybody in our Discord. But yeah, I mean, if I'm handling what's the combination that's going to be the least likely? A naked Muhammad? Is that like the most under?
Yeah, that would be naked Muhammad and then Sterling? Naked Cejudo.
You think a naked Cejudo is even
there? Or naked Sterling, maybe naked. I mean, whatever. Obviously, only playing one of these 4 guys. I don't know. Based on how the fights play out, I mean, dude, there are legitimate paths to none of these fighters being in the optimal lineup because of all these high ITD lines. That absolutely. the one that the fighter that scares me that scares me the most to make 100 points is Aljamain Sterling.
And is that based upon slower striking and the
Yeah,
wrestling of stalling out?
Right. I think he's more likely to hit a ceiling when he's the one initiating grappling, but he's facing Henry Cejudo. So like I think it's if Aljamain Sterling gets a victory, it's because Cejudo has taken him down and Sterling has reversed and gotten on his back. But that's not a volume-based thing. So like I have to wait for an event to happen.
He's not going to continue to punch his brains in either. He's going to just
Right.
try to hold position over the finish, which is another thing you need to kind of account for your fantasy wise. And I want to ask about Gilbert Burns. What about this turnaround, Blender? Last pay-per-view he was on, only 3 rounds. Now they slot him in. I mean, the narrative, I guess, is the next guy gets a title shot. Well, I'd argue the A side, maybe the public thinks the A side is Burns, but is Muhammad. Muhammad's the one that was shooting up. Muhammad was going to be taking on Shavkat. Like, that was the big talk of this thing. And now he faces Burns, who has a really good inside the distance line. I think on any other card that didn't have 2 5-rounders, we'd be talking about him, right? Like, plus,
yeah, but I mean, what is he going to look like in the 4th round? What is it going to look like? To me, out of all the fighters on the slate, you would have to agree with me, Mike.
Yep.
Out of all the fighters on the slate, and possibly all the fighters on the current UFC roster, there's no one with a higher fight IQ than Bilal Muhammad. Like, if whatever the game plan against Gilbert Burns that you should do, he's going to do to almost an annoying level, even if it's not good for DFS, right? I think it's more likely to me that Muhammad lands takedowns more than Burns.
I would agree with, and Burns is not even that great of a fantasy commodity. I mean, I think people maybe think that he's really pretty damn good, but these are 3-round fights. I mean, did he ever have a 5-round decision, 102 with 2 takedowns against Woodley? I mean, they could just stand and trade for 5 rounds, and then I guess I'd have to take the underdog, but it's not like it's a 7,400 Bilal. Right?
I think it's more likely, Mike, that if the fight ends early, it's because Burns ended it. But if anyone's going to get the most points out of 5 rounds, I think it would be Muhammad. I think in a 5-round decision, that's 48-47. I see Muhammad could score like 92 points and be optimal at 8,000. Like that. That I see more paths to that. And I could say the same thing with Cejudo. I think so. If this goes 5 rounds and it's a 48-47, I just think Cejudo has more volume and more control and more takedowns. Sterling may have moments where you get one of those Joe Rogans, like it's tight, and it's of course not tight, and he slips out. Maybe you get something like that. But I think Aljamain Sterling's much more likely to he doesn't mind just having this be a kickboxing match.
Yeah, I mean, hey, he's the guy that did the nice drama or performance after the Jan fight. So I mean, he's not opposed to just getting the win. But there's one person right there we haven't talked about is the Verna Chernodoba. You say you don't like that Rodriguez and Chernodoba fight, but isn't the more likely of the two to score tremendously well Chernodoba in like a 1st or a 2nd round finish to get really, really interesting point-wise? Because I could see her getting a finish in the 2nd round and scoring like 65, 70. Well, it wouldn't be 65. It would be 70 plus. But I think with that being said, Marina... What if Marina comes out like a bat out of hell and knocks her block off at low ownership? That's the only thing that scares the hell out of me.
Well, she has a 23% chance inside the distance. I mean, but that's her path. She has the same path to 100 points as all these other fighters with an inside the distance line that is half of them. So, like, that's the reason why, like, at 8,500, like, I don't know.
You can't play her.
I can't play much of her. And Jandiroba has wrestling upside, submission upside. Just understand that once she gets to round 3, don't expect her to get any points in round 3 because I don't think she's ever won on the scorecards in round 3. I don't think she's ever won a 3rd round before. So like if Marina wins in the 3rd round, I mean, the fight's a bust. I think it's more likely for those prices, the fight's more of a bust Like if Jandiroba was 7K, that now we're talking about it's a little bit easier for 90 to be good enough or 85 to be good enough. But at 77, she has to outscore Braxton Smith, Cron Gracie, probably Bilal, right? Probably Joseph Holmes. If any of these other guys get a finish underneath her, it's going
It's
to
an
be tough
exact
at
outcome.
7,700 to build those types of lineups.
Yeah, it's difficult because it's this card. I would almost wish stayed at like 14, 15 fights. Being 12 fights, it just limits really what you can do with the slate.
It's a lot more than you think, though. I mean, I came in going, ugh, I wish that the Santos fight was
Me
on and
too.
the Estevem fight, especially since they were both mid-range fights, like that 8,400, 8,300, because it makes it really weird. Like that if they were still in play, then the non-5 round type of lineup was much more viable. But the fact that there's a $300 gap between Burns and Rodriguez and Muhammad and Jandiroba, like it's like so many lineups that you're going to build, no matter what your construction is, kind of need someone in the 8K range, like right in that mid range. It's just a matter of which one. So that's the main reason in my 100 lineups I do have 1 5-rounder in all of them, because
You're telling me you're not going to play Bryce Mitchell on this slate?
he'll be 0.08% owned or something,
Okay,
right?
let's
A couple of people will pay a little bit of the rate.
Almost nearing 5 minutes before lock here. Remember, this brought to you by Fanduel Sportsbook. If you're in a legal sports betting state, take advantage of their awesome bonus offer. New customers get a bet $5 and get 150 in bonus bets. Terms and conditions apply. Before we got on here, even Blender, you were talking about a potential one that we both like. I'd say somebody that can win almost anywhere. We like Jessica Andrade. I mean, I'm not going to say go out and put everything on it, but it's a pretty solid bet. And she just, I think the stat was like that she scores like 5 fantasy points per minute or something like that out there, which is just tremendous. Her pace is going to be there. My only problem with her is that she's just got such a quick turnaround since February, where Blanche
She barely fought. I mean, that fight didn't last long.
Yeah, but apparently she's got a hand injury. I'm not going to get into that because, I don't think she's going to come back for a paycheck. She's one of the best in the division for a reason. But I like that side of things. And yeah, I mean, what else? What's your final thoughts before we get out of here? Because
Lando asks, it's like, you don't think it's a good idea to fade both main events? You can.
No, you can't. Definitely. I could see the stars.
Everything all depends on the lineups. Remember, I do not predict the outcomes of anything. All I'm doing is weighing the probability of something happening versus what the field is going to do, and then build lineups accordingly to that. So based on the pricing on a 12-fight card, when 2 of the mid-range fights have been canceled, it's hard. Try to go build your lineups without a 5-round fighter in it, just based on price. You end up having to play like, I need to play 2 like 7,200. You start playing these stars and scrubsy types lineups, and I think it's more likely, more probable that one of these 5-round, like the mid-range fights. So like it's quite possible that the nut lineup is something like Andrade is Alex Zarov, Andrade, Porter, 5-round fighter, Gracie, Jandiroba, like something like where like literally you don't have to play any of the like the low type of guys, but in order to make that lineup, you have to play an $88,000, $8,200 fighter. Like you almost can't get around it. So that's the main reason.
I know that somehow Evlev, Williams, one of these two, well, probably both of them somehow bust, and I'm just frustrated with my super high ownership on Evloev. But yeah, I mean, sometimes we just lay it in the realm of possibilities, and Fight Metric / UFC Stats likes to do what they like to do too, Blender.
And I think draws 374 significant strikes then, right?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Next week, though, Blender, we got Rosenstruck in Almeida. That's 13 fights. Going to be
as of
North
now,
Carolina.
It'll be 9 by the time we talk next week.
You think so? I mean,
the way things go, I mean, come on. Why don't they just book like 18 fights at this point?
They should do that for fight week in Vegas. That would be nice. And maybe we'll finally get our, back-to-back
What
Friday
they
and
should do,
Saturday card.
Mike, is they should book like 17 fights. The max that they're going to put on is 15.
Mm-hmm.
And if all 17 are good to go, that
Pump
there's
it
already 2 fights that are like they say
next week. Go to
right
next week.
right. That they stop your weight cutting and say, okay, we can move these to next week. So they always get like 14, 15 fights on these cards.
Yeah, and I mean, that would be ideal, but you and I both know the machine that they have, and they don't like that model one bit. Eyes on the lock here, still good with fights. Fingers crossed. They don't start the broadcast with the camera on the announce desk for anything crazy here, but
right.
Yeah,
I whenever they start the broadcast with, we have bad news. I'm like, please don't let it be the Parker Porter Braxton Smith fight.
I hear you for sure. Make sure you follow us both on Twitter at BlenderHD and at H3Buddha. Again, hope we got if we don't win, we hope you guys certainly do. We will see you guys next week.